Okay, so I've been waiting for my DSS axles for my M6 for about 6 weeks now. Sorry, got to make sure it's operating. So I went to the track, I broke the driver's side, and I ended up, just making up a decision that I wanted to reinforce them so I could run them well. And a lot of guys on the forums had to replace them already because they have upgraded power. I have a OTS stage 2 on 93 octane from the boot mode 3 application, and it's running pretty strong. I have revision 4 for the stage 2 93 octane tune. I do have downpipes, which I'll be doing a video on later, which will explain, how to install the downpipes, what I did. But right now I just want to focus on the installation, removal and installation of these axles. There's a lot of guys on the forums. I don't think there's one on the forum that actually goes through removing and installing and working through the paces of it. But I'm semi-mechanically inclined. I've worked on ZR1s and other cars and Audis and things like that. Just doing just basic engine upgrades, suspension upgrades, things like that. So I do have a shop here, and it has a lift, and I have plenty of room. So I'm not saying I'm a professional mechanic by any means, but I know enough to be dangerous. So one thing that I do want to show you, or we can just get started on showing you, is that a lot of what happens here is pretty simple. It shows on the directions on ISTA to drop the rear diff and everything, but I didn't do it that way. What I did was I actually obviously removed the tire, removed the brake disc, left the caliper on it because there's really no reason. There's some electronic monitors and everything that go in it. There's that you have to remove, that all get really connected here, attached on back to its mounting clips. There is a sensor that you have to pull out of the wheel hub, the spindles there, and you end up removing the this back control arm that actually goes here, if you can see it, to the mount on the subframe, rear subframe, and mounts. It's just another control arm. You leave the front one on both sides. You'll end up leaving the front one on, but that's the only one I removed. There's also some through bolts you'll remove. Back on, my strut shock is completely removed. But in order to kind of play with this thing and remove items, you also have to pull the dust shield off that is mounted, just so you can move around and get to bolts. I loosened these up, which it's like a cantilever arm on the bottom A-frame of this, just so when I pulled the bolt on the shock after removing the rear control arm, I could actually pull this. Oh, sorry, I did remove this. I had to take off the front control arm bolt right here. So this actually gets removed. This will pull up, which I'll show you here in just a second, to fold down the hub so you can slide the axle in. So I'll go ahead and remove that now and show you. Okay, so now all I did was just simply remove the nut off the bushing there, in the through bolt, and then lift that up, set it to the side, okay, and then all this will fold down. Make sure you have your cable though, that services your sensors and everything on your calipers. Push behind it, otherwise when you pull down, you'll pull on the cable. So dust shield's out of the way, I'm clearing everything, I'm just looking around to make sure I'm clear. This bolt here on the bottom is loosened, so is this bolt here, just so I can fold it down. So I'll just pull on it, fold it down, and then now I just kind of turn it just to kind of clear the jack, and I can pull it down a little further. This stays to the side, and now I have access all the way to the rear diff. Okay, now I can go ahead and slide the axle in, pop it in place, and I will be okay. So I'm going to start doing one side of these and then going through the tightening mechanisms. And you know, there is torque specs on these. I'm going to follow them. I printed off the sheets online, so I can just walk myself through and tighten them to the proper torques. And then hopefully this will only take a couple hours, but that's everyone's famous last words when you're working on a car. It'll only take a couple hours. I'm probably going to be here for a long time. I'll be real surprised if I'm not. But I'll start getting the axles in place and start showing you here in just a second. Okay, I had to change there. But now that I do have a work light on, I do want to show you a little bit better. You can probably see it a little bit better. You know, so this through bolt that goes through, this long bolt here actually mounts into your hub through the back here. You know, and here's the bushing, you know, it just tightens it up to the back of the hub. Okay, there are some of these smaller bolts like this that go through the back of your caliper, and they actually mount the caliper to the hub here. So that'll give you an idea. You know, this goes on the inside here, and then you through bolt it, and it has threads actually on the caliper, so it'll hold it, you know, in place on the hub. So that's those 2 bolts. That's what the big bolt here is for. And then these are just the tools kind of that I used. Make sure you don't disorganize these nuts and bolts, because they have to go back on the proper bolts that are here on the knuckles and everything. So I mean, really there's not a lot of pieces. There's really not a lot of pieces when you're doing this. It's just, once again, you know, as you go to put things back in place, you got to make sure you're putting it in properly. Also, one thing to take note of is when you're doing this, the reason I didn't remove like the whole hub and everything like that is because I didn't want to have to realign. Maybe I still will have to realign, but on the front control arm here that comes to the front of the car and the front of the rear hub, that's your adjustments for your alignment right there, okay? And then you have adjustments, you know, for your alignment that are actually, you know, the egg ones for, you know, back there, you know, I mean, and right up front, or I'm sorry, right here, okay? So I didn't want to mess with any of that would change the alignment. What I wanted to do was just take off the bolts that I could put back in place easily and not mess with the alignment. I'm hoping everything works out the way that I planned it to be, but we'll see here in just a second. And I also wanted to show you underneath the car of what you're seeing after you move the cover plates or the shields. So this is underneath the car. You know, when you drain your rear differential, this is your drain, then this is kind of like your level plug. And the reason I call it a level plug, it's not necessarily a level plug, but they tell you that, you know, if you put your new plug in and you're filling it up, that as you fill it up here, that you need to stop as you fill it and it starts to trickle out or get up to the level of the plug. That's when they say you should have enough fluid. So I'm going to do that too. That'll be a whole nother video. But that's what I'm saying, you know, you get a good look under here and see what you're dealing with. That's the open. That's a look at the rear and how I connected. Or you connect the axles, you just drive them in. There's actually like a C-ring, it's a clip, retainer ring, that actually goes in there that you're gonna have to snap them in, the axles in, and the axles actually have a little retainer recess in the spline that when you snap it in, that C-clip snaps in to the axle partially and snaps in to your rear differential facing hub part there that locks the axle in. All right, I'm gonna get to it here. I'll get to you in a second. So one more thing I wanted to get before I get going, I just wanted to show you guys the unboxing. So when you unbox these, you open it up, you know, they give you some stickers, you know, they give you a little warranty page, haven't read that yet. But this is how they come. You know, they come in and they were stacked nicely. This was folded over, you know, they had the bubble wrap a little tucked in there. But, you know, you can tell that they went through and really worked on these things. You know, I mean, they feel beefier. I'm not sure though, but they feel a little beefier. You know, but they harden the axle, I know that, you know, and then they do some other implementation of these. But, you know, I look at these things and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you have so much power going to these, and no wonder they snapped. But this housing they replaced, you know, here, I'm not sure what they did on the internal, if they did anything. You know, this is the recess in the axle that I was talking about. There's a little C-clip connector inside that you got to pressure fit it, put it through, and it'll snap into here. So that's the recess for that. You know, these axles actually slide back and forth, you know, in the housing, because there's ball bearings inside this. Okay, same thing here. You know, these axles right here actually move around pretty well. But when mine broke, and I'll show a picture in there, it actually shot and twisted here. This member came apart and it broke the, it looks like a brass housing almost, you know, on the stock ones, and shattered it, and the whole thing twisted. And that's where it broke, right here. Everything else was good on it. You know, the hub side was good, the splines were good. It's just, I don't know, a lot of people have issues with it breaking, you know, right there from what I heard, you know, within the housing. So I just wanted to show you that. I think it's good to know how these come packaged. You know, there's guys that are selling them online as well. I mean, there's the other one. There's the passenger side. There's guys that are selling these online as well, you know, that are used and all that. And there was a guy that I was thinking about buying them used from. But what concerned me with it was the guy, it was a leased car. He had everything upgraded on it, upgraded turbos and everything like that. So his lease was up. He was sending it back in. And I was thinking, okay, well, he had these DSS reinforced axles on it. He was pushing a lot of power to the rear wheels, and it got me really nervous thinking that, okay, well, sure, they may be reinforced, but at the same time, how many runs does he have on it? How many launches does he have on it? I mean, how hard were they beaten on? Because, you know, metal has so much life to it and resistance on it, and even if it's reinforced, the more and more you torque that metal, you're going to continue to have wear on it. So the axles could have been fine, honestly, they could have been. I could have had, you know, a bunch of wear on them, got them here and snapped them again. I just wanted to start with something fresh, something new, something at least rebuilt new that I could start with no wear on it. You know, so that's why I chose to do that route. Some guys can purchase them online. I may be just a little over concerned with it. That's why I didn't do it. But I did wait a long time for these axles. It was originally supposed to be 10 days, but then it turned into 7 weeks. So I guess timing of year 2, a lot of guys are racing right now, breaking their axles, etc. But I called in, I checked constantly on these, and they just kept saying, well, we're waiting on this, we're waiting on that, you know. So I think it was just more timing than anything. But you know, of year, maybe if you pull them off in the winter and send them in, you know, I don't know, maybe it'd be the real 10-day lead time, they say, to rebuild these things due to the fact that no one's racing during the winter. I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna start to lube these things up and get the axles in. Finally, I just wanted to show you the opening of it and how they come packaged. Okay, so I've already done this. You know, I've already proceeded doing this, but I ordered the rear differential fluid. I don't know if you can see that, guys, but it's a Castrol. It's a limited slip, 75W140. It's a Syntrax. It is an approved oil on on the BMW forums, as well as ISTA D and other areas that I looked up to make sure it was correct. But what I did was I took a little bit of oil, and it calls in the instructions to lube up just this outer that goes inside. It's like a little kind of smaller ring here that will be running inside. And I'm guessing they're just doing it to say, hey, when you install this, it's going to need a little lube in order to go in, and plus they just want it when it's spinning against the hub of the differential in there that it just doesn't rub metal on metal right away. It'll take a little bit to get lubed up. So I went ahead and did that, and we're going to start the process of installing now. Okay, so I'm not kidding, it took me less than a minute, maybe a minute and a half, give it, okay, to slide this in. So this is the right side, which according to the directions it's supposed to be installed first. I don't know whether it's because I lubed the clip up very well or what, but the splines and everything just meshed right in, and resting the housing here, even though it says in the directions don't rest the housing there, you know, of the hub, but I really have no choice. I'm working by myself. So I was really surprised. I did have to get under the car and just slide up underneath there just to guide it in. But as you can see, I mean, it went right in the clip. There's no movement, no nothing. It went right into the splines. I did have to turn it a little bit in order to get close to the splines and line them up right. But it went right into the housing, the diff housing. I'm really, really surprised. Maybe the process of lubing it up helped, but I don't think I'm gonna have that luck on this side. This one was the side that was very difficult to get off. And it took me about an hour and a half to get it off, which was just pry bar and trying to pop it out off that C-clip, that circlip that's in there. But, you know, maybe it'll go in easier because last time it was torqued because it broke. Maybe there's so much tension in it, torqued it, you know, in there a little harder. But I'm gonna try it again on this side and see if I can get it in just as easy, and hopefully I do. And I'll show you here in a minute. So I'm going to try and give it to you as I go because I don't have enough battery left on my GoPro to actually show you. But what I did was I grabbed a hold of the shaft and I brought the shaft side hub. You know, you have grooves in the back of your wheel hub here, and this bolt goes through and attaches the CV part, you know, the hub part of the axle to the wheel hub here. So I pulled it because these shafts can expand and go in and out a little bit. You know, don't jerk on them or whatever because you will damage them. But I just slowly, nicely maneuver it to where it catches all the teeth on both sides, the axle teeth and the wheel hub teeth. And then I held it there and tightened it just to get it in place. Now prior to extending the axle and connecting it to the teeth of the wheel hub, I did drop in this control arm just to keep the hub up. Okay, so this control arm was actually in place there, you know, just to keep the hub up to where I knew my distance. Now I do have my axle here, or I do have my shock here that I'm going to probably put back in place, but I got to drop, you can see how I got this holding it up. I'm going to have to drop it down once I do that just to make sure that I can go up to my shock absorber, or go down to my shock absorber because it's lower than the top of my wheel hub and the insert where it goes. So I'm going to end up lowering that here in just a little bit. But I just, you know, that was a key point that I thought you needed to know because it took me a little bit to figure it out, but not very long. And I don't know, you know, sometimes you get going and you're trying to get these steps down, and these little helpful steps will hopefully save someone else some time in the future. Car's all back together. Couple things here, just make sure you get your electronics snap back in. You got a sensor on top here that you got to put in. You got the control wiring for just the little harness, has a female end of the plug needs to go back in. You have the electric wire that needs a clip back into the back of that housing, the electric housing. It's just like a little snap fit and a little to keep the brake wiring away from the dust shield. And you got some pretty heavy torque. This one on top, next to the brake sensor in here, is like 67 pounds of pressure off the control arm here. And then these other control arms are like 167 pounds. And then tightening up the lower part there is another 167 pounds. But, you know, just make sure you get these back in, these small little hex bolts that actually end up fastening your rotor back to your wheel hub, and then your main bolt that goes into your axles. I'm surprised it only calls for 36 pounds to crank that down, but that's what it calls for. One thing that I forgot to mention before is I had to take off the my car's set for, you know, about 2 months waiting on these axles. So while it was off, I didn't have a bolt through the wheel hub and connecting the strut, so the strut kind of sagged over time. Now I pulled the control arm back off the back control arm here, and then pulled the knuckle out on the front control arm here. And what we did was we pulled down on the cantilevered arm there on the bottom below the axle, and I did leave it connected to the sway bar back there, but I probably could have pulled it off the sway bar and made it a little easier, but luckily I was getting enough force to pull it down to the level of where I needed to connect it to the strut. And same thing on the other side, but we're all put back together. Remember to lube the spline side that goes into the rear end, and it should pop right into those circlips pretty easy that hold them. And remember that you got to hold the shaft on this side that goes to the wheel hub, and tighten when you're tightening down the wheel hub shaft side, the shaft to the wheel hub, back of the wheel hub here. Make sure you get your splines correct. I can't show them now because it's put back together, but you have these, you know, it's little splines, it looks like almost little gearing on the axle part that connects to the hub. Get that set up and hand tighten it down to keep it in place, and then just start tightening the nuts and bolts. And that's it. We're gonna put the tires on and crank it up. And I did put it in gear and ran it in gear while it was still up on jacks, well, blocks, but and everything worked well. It went into gear. There's no grinding, no nothing. So I think my rear end was actually saved on this. It was just the axle that busted. So hopefully that's the case. Okay, so I got the axles back installed. Everything works well. Took it out for a drive, ran it around, put it through the paces, and it runs well. Nothing wrong with it. No grinding. The brake pads, everything that I did to put it back, opposite of reverse taking it off, you know, ended up working all right. I do, however, now this is going to be this is the separate video that I was talking about earlier of the draining the rear end differential fluid. So as you can see, there is a bolt here, you know, goes into the rear diff, and then there's a drain plug.